Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to have you here again. Let's explore the compelling area of transparency of EU funding granted to NGOs, a topic that has drawn growing attention following the 2022 Qatargate scandal and the 2024 European Parliament resolution calling for greater accountability and transparency. Building on the insights from my previous video on this subject, it's now time to share the key conclusions and recommendations from our report. But first and foremost, what makes transparency so crucial? Transparency is at the heart of the European Union, as it provides citizens with the information they need to hold public decision makers to account. This means knowing not only to whom, why, and for what purpose EU funds were granted, but also how they were used, the amounts involved, and whether recipients adhered to EU values. Indeed, public transparency applies to all types of recipients of EU funds, but we have a special focus on NGOs. We all know that NGOs and other civil society organizations play an important role in democratic policy making. They empower citizens' participation through ongoing dialogue. But it is absolutely crucial that this is done in full transparency. In other words, transparency is key in ensuring a credible participation of NGOs in EU policy making. As regards the EU funding granted to NGOs, over 7 billion euros, EU funding was granted to NGOs in the selected EU's internal policies, such as cohesion, research, migration, and the environment in the 3 years from 2021 to 2023. To put it into perspective, NGOs received close to 4% of funding from the EU budget for the selected internal policies. But we are sounding a warning that even these figures should be taken with a pinch of salt. We are concerned that there is no reliable overview of EU money paid to NGOs. The information is published only in a fragmented way, which hampers transparency. Indeed, in our report, we found that EU funding for NGOs is too opaque and suffers from a lack of transparency. Despite some progress since our last audit, the picture of EU funding for NGOs remains hazy. This is because information on EU funding, including lobbying, is neither reliable nor transparent. For example, the European Commission did not properly disclose certain EU-funded advocacy activities, such as lobbying. In addition, there are no active checks that NGOs funded respect EU values. Both these shortcomings expose the European Union to reputational risk. On the positive side, we have seen that the Commission made progress in collecting information on EU funding granted to NGOs since our last audit in 2018, when we focused on external policy. And just last year, the EU defined an NGO as being independent from government and a non-profit organization. This is a step in the right direction, especially as the definition varies across EU countries, and only 6 member states define NGOs in their national legislation. But that is not nearly enough, and what citizens would expect. Weaknesses still persist in the way that information is disclosed, and the definition alone cannot ensure that NGOs are correctly classified in the EU's financial transparency system. This is because entities self-declare NGOs, and the Commission does not check important aspects of their status. For instance, the Commission does not check even whether a government exerts significant influence over the NGO's governing bodies, or whether an NGO pursues its members' commercial interests. We were quite shocked to find that one large research institute was categorized as an NGO, while its governing body was composed solely of government representatives. And we also found another rough example of an entity being registered as an NGO despite pursuing its members' commercial interests. It employs more than 250 staff and has offices worldwide. Let me come to a couple of more very important and critical messages. Firstly, the Commission did not clearly disclose the information it held on NGO advocacy activities that were financed by EU grants. We came across 2 cases of operating grants financed by the LIFE program, which included advocacy activities with policymakers. Actually, it was only during the audit that the Commission issued guidance that grant agreements should not require recipients to lobby EU institutions. Secondly, EU fund managers do not proactively search for potential NGO breaches of EU values, such as the rule of law and human rights. As a result, checks on funding sources that can provide useful information about who stands behind NGOs are lacking. In today's world of not only politics, but geopolitics, this is crucial for the European Union's credibility. Let me move now to what we suggest as a way forward. We are calling on the Commission to classify NGOs consistently, improve spending data, and actively verify NGOs' compliance with EU values. Some changes have already been announced for the next years, but the expected regulatory improvements will not require the Member States to report on payments, which is a lost opportunity for improving transparency and trust. To conclude, while some progress has been made since our last audit, the picture of EU funding for NGOs remains hazy. This is because information on EU funding, including lobbying, is neither reliable nor transparent. Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely appreciate your time as we delved into the key findings of this crucial report. Democracies thrive on people's participation and trust, and people's trust in them, in turn, thrives on transparency, which is key to ensuring credible participation by NGOs in EU policymaking. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more insights on EU matters. And let's work together for a more democratic and transparent Europe.